Hi class, today I want to talk about the Euthyphro and in particular Socrates' request from Euthyphro for a definition. If you look at 6 and about 6e to 7a, we have Socrates asking Euthyphro for a definition of piety. And Socrates says to Euthyphro, "Bear in mind that I did not tell you to tell me one or two of the many pious actions, but that form itself that makes all pious actions pious. For you agreed that all impious actions are impious, and all pious actions pious through one form. Or don't you remember?" Euthyphro says, "I do. Tell me then what this form itself is, so that I may look upon it, and using it as a model, say that any action of yours or another's that is of that kind is pious, and if it is not, then it is not." So Socrates' request for a definition is ultimately a request for a form, for Euthyphro to state the form of piety in this instance, or the form of whatever it is you're seeking to define. The word form in Greek is eidos, E-I-D-O-S, and it can also be translated as idea. And it's a sort of really one of the centerpieces of Plato's philosophy. When Socrates is asking Euthyphro for an eidos, what he specifically does not want is an example of something that he could see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, nothing that comes from the senses. And so to explain what Socrates is after, I'm going to use a slightly different example than piety, something that I think will work a little better. Suppose that Socrates wants to know what a triangle is. And I say, okay, Socrates, this is a triangle. And this is a triangle. And this is a triangle. All of these are triangles, Socrates. Is Socrates going to be satisfied? No, he won't be, because I'm just giving him examples of triangles. I'm not telling him why these things are triangles. So what Socrates wants when he asks for the definition of something is not examples of individual triangles for him to look at, but he wants to know what is the essence of a triangle. What is it that makes a triangular thing a triangle? Why is this not a triangle, but this is? Right? What makes this a triangle and this not? Now, the answer, we might say, is fairly obvious. This is a triangle because it has 3 sides, and this is not a triangle because it has 4 sides. And I want to dig into that obviousness a little bit, because that is actually on the right track. What makes this a triangle and not this is that the triangle is defined as having 3 sides, and since this has 4 sides, it is not a triangle, right? So the part of triangularity is 3-sidedness. And so we sort of know now that to be a triangle, you must have exactly 3 sides. You can't have more than 3, you can't have less than 3. In addition, we know that the triangle, right, will have 3 interior angles. 1, 2, 3. And the sum of those angles will equal 180 degrees. If somehow you have a 3-sided polygon whose interior angles, equal more than 180 degrees or less than 180 degrees, we don't have a triangle. So this is a triangle, and this thing, which looks radically different, is also a triangle. Now, what Socrates would want us to notice is that what makes these things a triangle is not something physical, not something in the material of the examples I'm holding up, right? This is plastic, this one's made out of metal, right? And the triangularity has nothing to do with what it's made of. It has to do with how it's shaped, which brings us back to the Greek word eidos, or a form, right? The triangularity has to do with the form of the thing. And ultimately for Socrates, the understanding of the form is the understanding of the essence of the thing. What the essence of a triangle is not to be metallic with yellow writing on it. Right? The essence of a triangle is to be three-sided, and the sum of the angles of the three sides equal 180 degrees. That's the essence of a triangle. And that's why this can be a triangle, and this can be a triangle, but this cannot be a triangle. So part of Socrates' quest for definition is a quest for certain like universal principles that will define what a thing is. And his idea is that when we know what a thing is in this sort of more universal and deeper way, we get beyond merely examples, but we understand why the examples can be examples. So in the case of piety, Socrates doesn't want to know why, he doesn't want a list of things that are pious. He wants to know what it is about piety itself that makes those things pious. In the same way, again, he doesn't want to know that this is a triangle and this is a triangle. He wants to know what is triangularity such that these can be examples of triangles, but this is not an example of a triangle. So how do we come to that knowledge? Socrates thinks we come to that knowledge basically through reason, not through the senses. The senses can be a starting point or a jumping off point, but ultimately we have to transcend the senses and rely on reason, rely on discussion, debate, and in the case of triangles themselves, geometry. And in the Republic, one of Plato's major works, geometry is presented as sort of the gateway to philosophy. So when Socrates is asking Euthyphro about the definitions of piety and sort of excluding any possible examples, right, what he wants, therefore, is the form. So Socrates wants to know the form of piety. The form of piety, as Socrates understands it, like the form of the triangle, is eternal and unchanging. Right? A triangle will always have three sides. Right? You will never have a four-sided triangle. You'll never have a two-sided triangle. Part of the essence of triangularity is to be three-sided. So that Socrates takes to be an eternal truth. It's eternal and universal. On Mars, triangles have three sides. In ancient Egypt, triangles have three sides. In the 20th century, triangles have three sides. Never changes. Once you know the form of the triangle, you know something that is eternal and universal. You have sort of escaped the physical world that is constantly changing and mutating and coming into being and passing away, and you've acquired knowledge of something much higher and much more permanent. And this is what Socrates understands, at least in part, the philosophical quest to be about, is to gain knowledge of these higher and more permanent things. But it's not just a knowledge of mathematical things like my triangles, but knowledge of things like piety, or as the text goes on, justice, which he pulls into his discussion of piety towards the end. Knowledge of higher and better and eternal and permanent things can seem like a threat to, let's say, traditional Greek ways of thinking. Because for the ancient Greeks, the gods were not eternal, right? The gods, at some point were born, right? Like I think I told you the story of, Zeus being born and his father trying to eat all his brothers and sisters. And at some point, the gods will die, right? The gods are not eternal. And what that means is that for Socrates, the form and knowledge of the forms is sort of a higher and better thing than the Greek gods and knowledge of the gods. That it's, in a way, it's better to know that, a triangle is a three-sided polygon than it is to know that Perseus is the son of Poseidon. Because knowing that Perseus is the son of Poseidon is just really knowing a particular thing. It's kind of like knowing that this triangle is red. But who really cares about knowing that this triangle is red versus knowing that this triangle is a three-sided polygon, the sum of whose angles equal 180 degrees? Right? Because any idiot can tell that this is red. So it's a pretty, shall we say, unimpressive level of understanding. What's more impressive is to know the form of this and to understand why this and this are the same kind of thing, even though they're different colors. And so ultimately for Socrates, as Plato represents him, the philosophical quest is a quest to get knowledge of the forms, of the form of piety, of the form of justice, of the form of courage, and the form of all these other sorts of things. But that knowledge is ultimately the same kind of knowledge as knowledge of the form of the triangle or anything else. And it is this kind of knowledge that separates Socrates from people like Euthyphro, who can really only give examples of things and can't really explain why the examples are examples of this or that. So I know this is kind of a lot, and it's kind of sort of deep water, but we have to understand at least the general idea of what's going on here if we're going to understand the principles by which Socrates operates and what his goals are as a philosopher and as a person. And so Socrates thinks that we need to get knowledge of the forms, not merely examples or particulars, but knowledge of the forms, and that it is only with this knowledge of the forms that we really know what we're talking about when we talk about things. When I don't know that a triangle is, again, a three-sided polygon, the sum of whose angles equal 180 degrees, then I really don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about all these triangles. Right? I have a very basic rudimentary understanding of things. So I have a basic rudimentary understanding of things. As we're going to see in subsequent texts, one of the practical upshots of this is that Socrates thinks that people that don't have knowledge of the forms of things should not be in charge. So that, if you don't know what the form of justice is, if you only have, examples of particular just actions, or maybe you just have some half-cocked opinions about justice that you haven't really thought through, like Euthyphro, maybe you shouldn't be in charge. Maybe we should only let people who have thought through what justice is or what law is and things like that be in charge of things. So this theory of the forms that we're introducing here has a political and sort of a social or moral consequence that puts Socrates on a crash course with Athenian democracy, right? Because remember, Athenian democracy is going to basically let, anyone can be in charge of nearly anything. And Socrates is going to maintain that only people with knowledge should be in charge of things, which is, in its own way, undemocratic. So with that, I'll let you all go, and we'll pick up with this on another day.